Hello everyone, welcome to Straight Talks F1. Formula One is back. Finally, after 2.5 months of wait, the 2025 season has kicked off with pre-season testing happening in Bahrain, and it has given us a taste of what the championship could look like this season. Off the top, McLaren seemed like the clear fastest team. There's no doubt about it. The way their test went, other teams like Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, they were left in an uncertain state, while McLaren were just sublime. And then there were a couple of teams like Aston Martin, Sauber, who were just nowhere. They seemed under par for most of the test. But what was exciting to see is the conversions of the cars. Many teams catching up to the front of the field. Williams Alpine, they definitely seem to have found something over the winter. So there's a lot to talk about Bahrain testing. Just 3 days of track action and they just flew by. Lots of new drivers settling in at new teams. Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari, Sainz at Williams, and then the whole batch of rookie drivers like Behrman, Antonelli. So a lot to unpack. But let's start with McLaren because I have to admit they are mostly the favorite for this season. Now it could easily look like McLaren are going to dominate this season without any competition. But 12 months ago, Red Bull were in the same situation after a flawless preseason test. And we all saw how their campaign just unraveled in the second half of the year. So, preseason testing has little relevance to how the actual pecking order would look like and how the championship standings would look like at the end of the year. It is super difficult to predict who will finish where based on the pecking order that's deduced after testing. Because if that pecking order is correct, Williams could be one of the top teams in 2025. With Carlos Sainz topping the times on day 2, he looked really quick, ahead of the Ferraris even. But that won't be the case. Realistically, Williams could be the 5th or 6th fastest team at best. But coming to McLaren, they definitely have the fastest package. Will they dominate? That's something that's a question mark. I don't think it's likely because the kind of close competition we have seen over the past year or so, it is impossible that one team runs away with the title. And I hope that this doesn't jinx the kind of competitive season we are all expecting to see. But yeah, McLaren needs to be wary of its competitors. They have the fastest package, but there will be teams like Ferrari and Red Bull chasing them at least as the season progresses, with upgrades coming in and the championship battle tightening up in both the championship, not just the constructors but the drivers as well. Lando Norris, he obviously is going to be leading McLaren's charge. He was sublime over the 3 days of testing. I don't think any other driver looks so comfortable in the car like Norris. Even Oscar Piastri's teammate, he was right there in the mix at the front, but he did not steal any headlines like Norris did. I do feel both will be in the title fight, even though many are just hyping up Norris's chances. Yes, Lando Norris will be the lead contender like last year, but do not count out Piastri to surprise everyone. The way he improves over the season and year on year, Oscar Piastri can have a huge impact on the 2025 World Championship. And McLaren overall needs to capitalize on both of their drivers' brilliance. It's not just that they should look to prioritize only Norris while sacrificing Piastri. That would be a grave mistake on McLaren's part. And they will face a steep challenge from Red Bull and Ferrari. So they need to bank on both of their drivers to ensure they retain their constructors' crown and at the same time look to have a better chance of winning the drivers' title. And for McLaren, it won't matter, right? Whether Norris wins the World Championship or Piastri does it. For them, the Drivers' Championship trophy is coming home. So it won't be a dominant campaign, I hope so. But McLaren have definitely set the benchmark to beat. If I draw parallels from last year's Bahrain testing, Ferrari have once again had a decent amount of running and a promising test, but they aren't making much noise about it. Previously, Ferrari used to be the best team of testing, and then Mercedes used to upstage them as the season began. Last year, they weren't doing so. Red Bull had a flawless test, while Ferrari just sat back and went through their program and then just silently went on to win the third race of the year. 12 months later, if there is a natural step up, Ferrari could even be the fastest team. Now, it isn't evident, of course, in the testing results. Ferrari are sort of the second fastest team after McLaren. That's what I feel because they have been consistently up there with McLaren in the long runs. While it is very difficult to gauge where Red Bull and Mercedes stand, so it is Ferrari who have the ability to make McLaren scratch their heads a bit. What's perplexing for Ferrari is that they have made a crucial change on their front suspension. It's a significant one, going from a push rod to a pull rod design to chase more aerodynamic efficiency. Will it work for them? It's hard to say because whenever such a change happens, that team may take time to understand that change and accordingly align and develop its car to that new concept. I'm just hoping that Ferrari doesn't take a significant step back due to this suspension change. I hope they maintain their performance ceiling from last year, carry on from where they left off. Many are saying that this could make the car a little bit slower, but it also has a higher performance ceiling. So, with upgrades coming in later in the season, I hope that Ferrari emerge as the fastest team. And obviously, there's a lot of opium from my end. It's been a long time since Ferrari were the world champions. Last year, they came very close, 14 points between them and McLaren. The way they have developed in the second half of last year, every Tifosi would be keen on seeing them lift the world title this year and see either of Hamilton or Leclerc take their driver's crown too. They can build a solid campaign, but they just need to avoid falling into that slump of form like they had last year after Monaco. If they can provide a car that's good enough to fight at the front, win races, I think the rest will be taken care of by Leclerc and Hamilton. So, against many of the sentiments that are stating that Ferrari are maybe third or fourth in the pecking order, I do feel Ferrari are in the title fight with McLaren. And that is not an unpopular sentiment completely, but it's a debatable one. Many experts have given mixed opinions on Ferrari, so that's the reason. But I am not being skeptical at all. As for their drivers, I feel Leclerc is going to surprise everyone. If he's going to continue his form from last season, there's just no stopping Leclerc from challenging for that driver's title. Hamilton might take time to get up to speed and win his first race for Ferrari. Can he emulate Raikkonen and Alonso winning his first race in red? That would be quite the spectacle, honestly. To rewind the memories back, Raikkonen won his first race in Australia, his maiden race for the Scuderia, and 3 years later, Alonso did the same in Bahrain. Can Hamilton do so down under in 2 weeks' time? It would be amazing to see that. He hasn't won in Australia for over 10 years now. His last race win came in 2015, and that's quite the stat considering that Hamilton has 8 poles in Australia, but he has only won twice. So I think it's about time he can take a third win. That would be really cool to watch. But yeah, it would be an interesting plot point to see when Hamilton gets his first Ferrari win. I feel it would come later in the season, maybe after Japan, which is effectively the fourth race of the season. So it's not that late. But yeah, it's rewinding the clock back. As for the championship battle, it's going to be the old classic McLaren v Ferrari. We saw a glimpse of that last year. I hope it turns out to be a full blown battle this year. Turning the clock back to 2007, 2008. Red Bull, Red Bull, Red Bull. It looked like someone clipped off their wings. because they seemed a bit off in Bahrain. On one hand, they did claim that the car was easier to drive, which is promising given the kind of handling and balance issues they had with the RB20 last season. But then their lap times and mileage wasn't impressive. It did not give a confident vibe like last year, like the past 2 years, in fact. So it is difficult to deduce where they stand, whether they have more trouble in store, or are they finally going to achieve salvation from the issues. What we saw from both drivers isn't promising overall. Liam Lawson firstly had a spin on day 2, and then his car also suffered from water pressure issue, so that limited his running on day 2. He could set only 91 laps. Cut to day 3, Verstappen ran the car for the whole day, and even his running was limited with just 81 laps on the board for him. So the question arises whether they are going to be in the fight with McLaren, or are they going to experience a pace gap like they haven't in recent years, especially at the start of a season. The second half of last year definitely gave them a reality check where they were the third or fourth fastest team even. The Hungarian and Italian Grand Prix weekends are something Verstappen would like to forget altogether. A bundle of issues on the car, the pace just not being there. Can they overcome that completely and get back at the front? Not to their dominant best, but match McLaren's benchmark, be at par with them, and then have a head-on championship battle. It is all a mystery right now. The car concept is the same like the RB20. It's just an evolution of that car. Now that could be a mistake again, or perhaps a blessing in disguise that they did not try too much. After all, it did help them close out the Drivers' Championship last year. Verstappen knows that car well. He knows how to extract performance out of it. If they can just iron out the chinks in its armor, Verstappen can emulate that this season as well. But I do feel that Red Bull may be managing expectations. If they can fight for both the titles, awesome. But if they can't, I do think that they would shift their focus to the 2026 car to ensure that they do not lose out in the long term. After all, they have an indigenous power unit now for the new regulations. Red Bull powertrains collaborating with Ford. How competitive will that be? Where will Red Bull stand next season? That's something that's more important in the long term for Red Bull to stay a competitive team in F1 overall. And focusing on their 2026 car, if they can't fight for the title this year, I think that would be the smarter choice. Now, Mercedes, they have once again rolled out a different car concept, and it's all getting a bit too funny now. It's like Ferrari saying every year, this is our year, we'll get back in the fight this year. So, will Mercedes find their form back with a new car concept?
I can't, it's broken! It's broken!
It's just they are once again in that flatter to deceive zone. From what we have seen in testing, that car, the W16, the Mercedes W16, it looked good at times, had some promise to match the frontrunners like McLaren and Ferrari, but then again, it just does not seem to have enough oomph, enough raw pace to fight at the sharp end. I don't know if Mercedes are going to make it fourth time lucky. Once again, they have a different car concept, I would say. It is not an evolution of the W14 by any stretch of the imagination. The side pods are different. They've changed the rear suspension. The entire packaging of the car seems different. It's more tighter. The side pods mainly are Red Bull inspired, with Red Bull's overbite inlet design that we saw last year, which has become the norm across the grid now. Except for Ferrari, I think every team has a modified version of that side pod inlet from Red Bull. Mercedes have also gone down the same direction. Will that yield good performance for them? Will they get back in the fight at the front? At the moment, it's very hard to predict that. Either George Russell parks it on the front row in Melbourne, or they are just going to stay in that P5 to P8 zone. For now, I do feel that Mercedes should look to focus on their 2026 car. That would again be smarter for them because hassling on this W16, if it doesn't have the potential to get back in the fight for wins, it's just going to be a waste of time and a waste of effort because none of this car is going to carry forward into next year. So it would be the same old story from the past 2 years. The way Mercedes struggled, flattered to deceive, won a few races, but then it just never really came together for them on a consistent basis. So let's see what happens with Mercedes. It's going to be funny and interesting, I would say. Whatever happens, I feel George Russell is going to be right there to capitalize on it. He'll take a couple of wins for sure if that car has some sort of performance even at select track, which was the case last season. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Now, Williams and Alpine are two teams I feel they have found something over the winter. This is completely based on the testing results. So it could be massively wrong, and Williams and Alpine could be fighting for avoiding the wooden spoon in 2025. Who knows? But Williams did look promising. Not just that Carlos Sainz topped the timesheets on day 2. Williams were actually quite promising across the Bahrain test. There was a little bit of uncertainty with the handling of the car, but the FW47 seems like a car that can get into the points consistently on merit and maybe even climb further. If there is any sort of chaos, I wouldn't put it past Sainz and Albon to capitalize on that situation and get a miraculous result for Williams. They're definitely not going to fight for podiums. That won't be possible this year on a consistent basis at least. But I would love to see Williams take a genuine step up in performance. They are an underdog team. They need success and they are making efforts towards that. Carlos Sainz has signed up for the same. And if the opportunity comes in this season, if things fall into right place at the right time, he's going to go all for it. I think the car has that much potential to go on the attack. Yeah, but regardless, 2026 is their ambitious overall. That is the time when they would look to climb up the pecking order for real and take a significant step forward. Get into the top midfield, maybe. Get back to where they were in 2014, 2015, fighting for third and fourth place. I think Alpine are on a similar trajectory. The way they recovered last year, it was quite commendable, and I feel they are going to carry on that trajectory, building on momentum from last season, building on momentum after their double podium in Brazil. Even their car looked decent like Williams. It wasn't a mind boggling one, but I would keep similar expectations from Alpine. I hope so, that they're consistently fighting with Williams for the low fringes of the points and perhaps having that potential to surprise at times, take that odd top 5 finish, and maybe become a podium threat in some races. So, yeah, Williams and Alpine, I would name them as the dark horses of this season. Haas had a separate test of its own. It felt like they were in another realm, testing on a completely different track than everybody else. Among all the teams, they were the big outlier. I would say even Red Bull were an outlier, but at least they were there in the conversation at the front of the field. Haas's performance benchmark is definitely quite different to Red Bull, so nobody basically cared about them and what they did. They just came to Bahrain and had their testing program, just went about their business as smoothly as anyone can. This is what Ayao Komatsu did last season, and we all saw the kind of results Haas achieved in 2024. The kind of step up they took, entire management in race space. I feel Haas could again do the same. In testing, they basically went underground, except for Oliver Behrman's engine cover delaminating on the final day. They did not have any issues, and nobody even noticed if they had any issues or where they were on the timesheets. Now, why was that the case? Because Haas were mainly focusing on the long run simulations. From day one, I did not see them do many performance runs on low fuel, on qualifying mode, nothing of that sort. They just were focusing on ensuring that they understand their long run pace. And on day one and day two in particular, if you see the final classification, both Behrman and Ocon are pinned down to the bottom of the table, way off the pace from everybody else. 3 4 seconds off. It was humongous to see. And if anyone sees that classification, they would say that Haas is going to be a complete backmarker this year. But yeah, that's not how F1 works. If someone is deliberately slow in testing and focusing on a dedicated program like this, there is something they have more pace to unlock. They will spring a surprise. So, heading into the season, we should bear this in mind for Haas. In terms of mileage, they had the second best lap count. They were just one lap short of Mercedes, who did 458 laps. So, they have a lot of mileage under their belt. I hope their long run pace continues to improve like it did last year. And from what we saw last year, I feel Haas are going to do well in 2025. To cap off the remaining three teams, who disappointed the most probably, firstly Aston Martin. From what I've seen during testing and the way they ended last season, I don't have any hopes from them. Yes, they will have Aiden Newey coming in this week. Hopefully, he can weave his magic, but that will be on the 2026 car. In fact, that should be on the 2026 car because this year I don't think they have any scope to improve. From where they left off last year, it's very difficult to see them get back into the fight for podiums. Actually, I do feel that they could be a bit worse than Williams and Alpine. Well, Haas would be trying to challenge Williams and Alpine. Aston Martin may take this backward step again unless they have found a huge amount of performance over the winter, which they can, but the in season development is something where they struggle awfully and just go downhill as the season progresses. Yes, Newey can make the car better, but mainly in the second half of the year. But how much will he focus on ensuring that the 2025 season ends well on a respectable note? And how much will he focus on ensuring that Aston Martin are competitive in the long term for the post 2026 era? I think it will be the latter. So yeah, there will be a natural step up if Newey can put off some magic dust on the DMR 25. But I'm not expecting that to happen until Austria or Silverstone maybe. They need to bounce back like McLaren did in 2023. That would set themselves up well for the 2026 title charge. Time will tell if that can happen. As for Sauber, I feel it's going to be the same old story. They would mostly be a backmarker. I don't think they have found any sort of performance improvement from their last year's car. I think they will definitely write off this season to focus on the Audi overall, and that will make sense. But they will still need to ensure that they set themselves up for next year by making some improvements over this season. Because realistically speaking, going from a complete backmarker to a podium contending or a race winning team in one season, in one winter, that would take quite some development. That Audi engine would have to be a super quick and super reliable one for that. But let's see how Sauber shapes themselves up for its new avatar in 2026. As for RB, Red Bull sister team, like did they even turn up? Because besides even a cool livery that recalls the 2021 Turkish Grand Prix Red Bull livery, they did not have much to offer. Yeah, that could be a difference maybe because last year they pleased everyone during testing and then they just fell flat as the season progressed. So maybe that could be a different scenario this season that they haven't flattered anyone during testing and they actually turn out to be somewhat competitive. For now, though, I don't see them anywhere near Haas or Alpine or Williams. So either this review is going to age really badly, or RB is going to just live up to that expectation of being in the lower half of the field. So yeah, that's all from my end in this F1 testing review. It was a very quick test. The 3 days just flew by. And it's kind of weird to not have a Bahrain Grand Prix right after Bahrain testing. The season will begin in Australia, which is kind of cool change again. Been a while since the season started in Australia, and especially after last year's season opener in Bahrain was a completely dull affair. I'm hoping that the Australian Grand Prix produces a banger race and there's a whole lot of competition for that win. As things stand, I would say that both Ferrari drivers, both McLaren drivers, and maybe even Max Verstappen is going to be fighting for that win in Melbourne. Are going to be fighting for that win in Melbourne. So a five-way fight. That is what I'm expecting from this 2025 F1 season. Yes, it's a bit too steep maybe, but I hope that McLaren don't go on to dominate. So it's important that we have this sort of competitiveness in the grid. Yes, McLaren and Ferrari, that will be the battle, I think. I hope it comes out to be true. And that title battle carries on throughout the season till the final race in Abu Dhabi. So, yeah, it's going to be a really, really exciting season. I am absolutely hooked on to it. Fingers crossed the season lives up to the hype. But yeah, that's all from my end in this episode. Arigato and stay tuned until next time.